Hey, this lesson is going to be exciting because we're looking at animations. So CSS, there's a shorthand CSS property and it allows us to apply animations. And the shorthand is for animation name, duration, animation timing, function, and you can also separate all of these properties out as well. So going over to the Mozilla Developer Network, they've got a great example here of this animation shorthand. And again, this is an introduction to the animation, so you can get far in depth with what you can do with the animation property. So this is going to be a quick overview. So going into there, you can select and see that it moves it in different ways. So the first one is going to be the animation name. Then there's the duration. So this is 3 seconds. The animation is going to be linear. It's also taking up 1 second. It's going to be running infinitely. So how many times it's running. Also running, and there's alternate, and there's a slide in for another type of animation. So they've got the breakdown for duration, timing function, delay, iteration count, direction, fill mode, play state, and name for the animation. And there's quite a bit that you can look at if you go over to the Mozilla Developer Network about animations. So I'm going to be just demonstrating how we can do a quick and easy animation. There's also keyframes that you can add in, and these are a way to break apart and specify when the animation is supposed to happen. So you can give those keyframes and create the keyframes as well for the animations. So going into the code, I've reset our HTML just back to the defaults where I've got some colors. I've got a little bit of width to some of the elements so that we can distinguish them on the page. So first off, we're going to create our keyframes. And what keyframes do is they allow us to break apart and specify when certain properties are supposed to be applied. So with the keyframes, you need to give the free keyframe name. I call it example. And then within the keyframe, we're going to set different frames for the animation at 0%. What it's supposed to do. And I'll set the width at 0% to be 100 pixels. The next keyframe is going to be at 25%, and we'll update the width to a different value of 200 pixels. Next, let's set the next keyframe at 50%, and we'll set it to be 300. Next keyframe will be 75% and set that to 400. And then lastly, once it reaches 100%, let's update the width to be 500 pixels. In order to apply it, let's set a default starting width for the element. So we'll start out at 50 pixels. And also set a height for it of 200 pixels. The background color can be red. And setting the animation name. So this is going to be where we're referencing from the keyframes. So using example. And then animation. So we've got delay, direction, duration, fill mode, iteration count, name. So all of these were covered within the shorthand. So let's set the animation duration and setting it to 5 seconds. So let's see what happens in the example. So see that what's happening is it's growing and it's going through all of those. So at the 5 second mark, so it starts out at 0%, and then it moves to the 25%, 50, 75, and then finally 100, where it's completely full. And then once the animation stops running, then that's it, the animation is completed. So you can also set the animation delay to start and delay the time that the animation takes place. There's also and this is a second value, so you'd be setting the delay by seconds, how many times that it should run. So that's the animation iteration. So the iteration count. So if you want it to run infinitely, you can do it infinite. I'll increase the speed to 2 seconds, and now let's see what this looks like. So now once it completes running, it's going to run it again. You can also set a numeric value for a count, so that will limit how many times you want your animation to run. You can also reverse direction for the animation. So animation direction. So it'll start at 100% and go back down. So and go back down to here, animation direction. So that's going to allow us to alternate the direction. So every time it runs, it's going to look a lot smoother where it's going to go out, and then once the animation reaches the peak, it's going to go back in. And you can also move the elements. So if we wanted to update the position of it, so set the absolute position, and let's set left to 0 pick. And then as we go through the animations, let's update that to 100 picks. And also I'm going to add another one, left to 400 picks. Let's see what happens, how that affects the animation. So you can add additional properties. So you see it's moving, it's kind of jumping around. So quite a bit you can do with the animation, and it can get very complex. You can add in additional keyframes as needed.